but we'll see how things go because I know Carrie's probably got quite a bit of things to show you. So, Carrie, on your end, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Heather, for having me, and thank you for the beautiful introduction, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is fantastic. And as Heather mentioned, we are going to specifically be going over Ontario billing, specifically HCAI, and specifically MIGS. And if I can make it through all of this and it all makes sense to you, then we can definitely go over the OCF 18s and 23s. And as Heather mentioned, always open to questions. Heather will be managing the chat, so I may miss the question, but Heather will interrupt me and bring it to light if it is related to what I'm talking about. But I will make sure I leave time at the end so that you can just ask questions at the end, so there will be time there as well. So good, I hope you're all strapped in and ready to go. So we're going to talk about MIGS. Now, I'm coming from the basis that you all know how to already bill an OCF 18, which is not a MIG, which is just your basic entering in services that have been performed, and you're sending it off to HCAI. So I'm hoping you already have that background. If the majority of you don't, please pop something into the chat to let Heather know, because then I can go through that really quickly. But I will be going through a little bit of how to actually submit the MIG and not just in the setup, because MIGs are very different than submitting an OCF 18, which is a 21B. We're going to be submitting, it's related to the OCF 23, and it's going to be your 21C, and so your minor injury guidelines. The setup for them is quite different. So I am going to dive in and we're going to take a look. And the client we're going to be working on here is my buddy Jim. And with Jim here, I have set up, I've already done some setup, so I'm not going to talk about going through everything with HCAI, but I've set up just a regular MIG. And then there's MIGs that get even more complicated when your extended health says, no, I'm not accepting your full block fee. I need you to send me stuff in a different format. I want to talk about that as well, because that's where things get really tricky. But I want to go over the basics with MIGs. So setting up your client, setting up your payer, setting up your fee codes, it's all pretty much the same way as you would with your regular HCAI. Heather does have documentation, so if after this call you're sort of really unfamiliar with what fee codes, how you need to set them up and what they need to look like, reach out to Heather or I and we can send you that document. Really quickly, we go into housekeeping, financial, and fee codes, and this is where you're going to enter in your MIGs. So I've set up some fee codes here that are related to MIGs. I've got my MIG tracker, my initial visit, my MIG 00, my MIG 01, my MIG 02, my MIG 03, my MIG SG, and there's MIG 24s, and there's other MIG transfers, there's other MIG codes that you can set up as well. But these are the basics. This is what I'm going to be talking about today. So first you have to add your fee code into Practice Perfect. And again, we have a document that lets you know specifically what they need to look like, because they do need to be set a specific way for HCAI to accept them. They want them set up as flat fees. And the fee type is important. For the MIG 00, it's an assessment. And for the following block fees, it is a treatment. And then your tracker, which you need, is set up a little differently than this. So again, if you need that information, let us know. Once you've set it up under your fee codes, then you have to take it one step further, and we need to go into our HCAI settings. So under settings, AISI HCAI invoice settings, we need to come in here, and there's a little tab called fees. And now I need to take my MIG fee codes, and I have to, this column here is the column, the code that I have created. This has nothing to do with HCAI. This is the fee code. If I go to my fee code list, this is what I'm going to see. The important things that I need to data fill in here is my AISI category and what code is HCAI expecting. And this is where things get tricky. So when we are setting things up for HCAI, you're probably used to setting them up for your OCF 18, which is really simple because you're going to come in, and in this list, they're probably going to be services. Well, now when we're doing MIGs, we are switching to two different options. We've got a minor injury guideline and a minor injury treatment. Blocks are guidelines, and your $0 charge is a treatment. So the majority of everything you set up in HCAI in Practice Perfect is going to be a block, so it's going to be a guideline. And there's a couple of weird things that HCAI has sort of done with this. And I'm going to give you a little bit of reasoning why they use guidelines and treatments. Like, what's the difference? So the big difference is with your block fees, when you're sending it to HCAI, the block fee is really set up as a minor injury guideline. And what the minor injury guideline does is it sends the amount of money to HCAI. How much are you charging HCAI for this? That's all that really the minor injury guideline does. It scrubs out the date. It will not send the date from Practice Perfect. It just sends the money. Whereas the minor injury treatment is the reverse. It scrubs out the money. So you could put $1 million in a minor injury treatment, which is your tracker, which you need to send along with a minor injury guideline, and it sends the date. So if you land up setting up fee codes and you're putting your money on your minor injury treatment, which would be your tracker code, that money's never getting to HCAI because it's not built that way. So that's usually a little mystery that sometimes it takes a while for people to understand. And I'll repeat it again when we go through it because it's probably hard to conceptualize right now. But once we look at an actual incident and how it's set up, I'll remind you what the minor injury treatment and what the minor injury guideline does. So again, you're going to come in here, you're going to put in whether it's a minor injury guideline and a treatment, 9 times out of 10, if it's a block, it's a guideline, and then you're putting in the code. What code does HCAI need to see? Because realistically, in Practice Perfect, I could call this code cookies. But when I send it to HCAI, that's what this column does here. This column tells me what HCAI, or tells HCAI what I'm billing for. So this is really important. So once all this setup is done, now we can go ahead and we can start doing some billing. So I'm going to go back to my little buddy, Jim. And with Jim, again, like I mentioned, I have 2 incidences set up. One for the regular MIG and one for a complicated MIG. The usual setup, you need to have the document number and the injury date and the diagnostic codes and all of that great stuff. We have videos that walk you through that stuff. But let's go into his activities by service to see how this all works now. So this is where things get a little tricky for some people. So we are looking at, right now, Jim, we have to bill extended health first. And then once extended health is exhausted, then we can bill HCAI. So we've got the 2 payers set up for this client. So you're going to see that when we're looking at activities by service. So what I've done is I've simulated something here. And I've simulated a situation where we are going to be billing for the initial assessment as well as block 1. So here is my initial assessment, my MIG 00. For the 215, and then here is my block 1 for the 775. Now, with the blocks, usually the adjusters want to see how often the client comes in. That's where your MIG tracker comes into play, this $0 visit. This is where you're going to see all the dates, 3/4, 3/5, 3/8, 3/10. And if you notice, these $0 trackers really are $0. The money is sitting on the block, your minor injury guideline, so to say. So that's where the minor injury guideline, minor injury treatment come in. So every time the client comes in, I want to enter in a $0 visit. So when I submit this to HCAI, HCAI is going to see, and I'm going to erase some of these drawings, getting a lot of information on there. When I submit to HCAI, HCAI is going to see, okay, I'm billing them for a block 1 for $775. And then all of these lovely dates are going to show up, and they're going to be able to see when the client came in for their block. So again, the blocks, 775, the amount's going on the minor injury guideline, and the minor injury treatment is set up as the MIG tracker, and all it cares about is the dates. So once we have this all set up, I'm just going to expand this a little bit so you can see. We can see here that I originally billed my block 1 to extended health. I just used a generic name because it could be any number of extended health companies. I billed the 775. I invoiced them on 3/30. They came and they paid me. They paid me a portion of the 775. They paid me 325. And then I transferred the balance to HCAI. And now I'm going to send this 450 balance to HCAI, because that's what they need to pay, as well as all of these $0 visits. And I did the same scenario for the initial visit as well. We originally billed it to Extended Health for $215, Invoice for $215, and that could either be through TELUS or that could be through where you're sending off a paper invoice. Either way, enter in their payment, transfer the balance to HCAI. So now I'm briefly going to go through, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, but I'm just briefly going to go through, okay, now I'm ready to send it to HCAI. What do? I've entered in the payments, I've transferred the balances. I'm going to flag the services that I want to send to HCAI, because I have block 2 here. Block 2 may not be done. I can only see they're coming a few times. Maybe we need a few more visits for block 2. So I just want to send my initial visit and my block 1. And we have a little fun trick. Some of you may know this and some of you may not. You can flag where you want to start in Practice Perfect. Hold down your shift button on your keyboard and flag where you want to end. Oops, my mouse stopped at the wrong spot. So I flag where I wanted to start. Now I hold down my shift button on my keyboard, flag where I want to end, and it fills all that in for me all at once without me having to manually do that. That's one way of choosing what I want to invoice. I could also adjust dates when I'm doing my, when I'm hitting my invoice icon. So when I'm ready to do the invoicing, I'm going to hit my invoice icon, little envelope with a piece of paper, or there is a keyboard shortcut if you prefer those, and that will be down at the bottom of the screen here. We have all of our keyboard shortcuts at the bottom of the screen. You can click F11 on your keyboard. I'm going to click my envelope with a piece of paper coming out of it. I'm not going to make any adjustments here. I've already flagged the services that I want to include. And that's why I did that, so that I know specifically this is what I'm going to send. I'm confident that that is all that's going. Sometimes if you don't do that and you just click the envelope with a piece of paper, it's going to send everything that's on your screen. You may want that, and that's great. If you don't, this is how you can be really specific. I'm going to say okay. And before I send anything to HCAI, some of you may know this, some of you may not, we have the option to send it right off the bat. So we've got our lovely little button here to send it to HCAI. We can post only, which really doesn't do anything. It just creates an invoice in the software and it doesn't go anywhere, but it looks like you sent it to HCAI. So we don't usually use post only in this scenario. I always want to preview. I want to make sure that everything is good to go. And I want to confirm what I'm sending. That's why I like to preview as well. So when I click the preview button, there's a few key things that I am looking at. And the first one, which you all may be familiar with this, but in case you're not, is I want to see this ready for submission. If I'm missing anything like an injury date or a adjuster name or phone number, it's going to let me know, and then I can make those adjustments. So that looks good. I'm happy with that. The next thing that's important is this column here, my fee codes. I want this to show the HCAI fee codes that I'm sending. I don't want it to show if I have a fee code named assessment or treatment. If it says that in this column, then HCAI will reject it. This means that if I see a different fee code in here other than what HCAI will accept, I haven't finished the setup on my fee code. And when I say setup on my fee code, I mean I need to go into, I'm going to come out of here and we'll come back to it in a moment. I've entered my fee code into housekeeping, financial, and fee codes, but when I come into my HCAI settings, I'm probably missing the key component, and that would be this area here, what HCAI needs to see. So that's what I mean by haven't finished up the setup of my fee code. If you do come across any of these errors and you're stumped, you're not sure how to fix them, please don't hesitate to reach out to support. That's what support is there for, to help you with these things. You don't need to sit there and struggle with it for hours and hours. You can send a quick email to support letting them know of the error message you're getting, and they can probably answer it through email for you and get you up and running in no time. And again, if you prefer a phone call, then just make sure you let them know that you prefer a phone call and they'll be happy to call you. So back to my activities by service screen, which is usually where you're going to do your billing for your HCAI, because you usually want to do it on a client-by-client basis. You don't have to. You can do it by bulk by the payer screen. We're going to do it from this screen today just so we can visually see things a little bit easier. I've got my services still flagged. I'm going to click my envelope with a piece of paper coming out of it. I'm going to leave everything here and say, okay, I don't want to send it. I want to do a preview. I want to make sure that it says ready for submission, which is important. I want to make sure that the fee codes look good. And I also want to make sure that this amount is what I'm expecting to send. When all of these match up, then all I need to do is I just need to go ahead and click my send button, and off it goes to HCAI. Now, unfortunately, sorry, I can't simulate that. So I'm just going to click post only, but we're going to pretend I clicked send. If things go to HCAI and they are not rejected, then you are going to notice in your paid and due column, you're going to see the amounts there. That immediately tells you that, okay, it went off to HCAI. And you can also just expand the dates of service if you needed to, and you can see that they are invoiced. So it's off to HCAI. And the beautiful thing with when you're using the integration between HCAI and Practice Perfect is that I can literally log into HCAI right now, and I can view this invoice in real time, which is really nice. And if you went to go and view this invoice in HCAI, you would see with your MIGs that when you're sending your block fees, although the date is different in Practice Perfect, so this block fee you'll see here says 3-3. When you go into HCAI, your block fee is actually going to reflect 3-1, which is your initial visit. Every block fee is going to have the same date as 3-1. And that's where, when I was talking about minor injury guideline and minor injury treatment, that's where I was saying that the block fees, the minor injury guideline, scrubs out the date and sends the money. The date that it defaults to is going to be the first visit on that incident, which is usually your MIG initial visit, so it'll always be 3-1. But when I go into a different area, which I'm sorry, I can't show you on HCAI, but hopefully you guys are familiar with it. When I go into another tab, when I'm looking at this invoice, I'll be able to see my trackers, which will show up as SZZPRs. These guys aren't going to have any money on them, but when I look at the dates, you'll see that all the dates will be reflected. They are not going to default to one particular date. And that's where the minor injury treatment scrubs out or removes the money and only shows the date. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And again, if you have any questions, shoot them off to Heather, or again, I'm going to leave some time at the end and we can talk about any other questions that you have. So this was the easiest MIG setup. You're sending to Extended Health. You may have a situation where you don't have to send to Extended Health, you're just sending it off to HCAI period. But if you're sending to Extended Health, you're billing them, putting in the money, and transferring the balance. You want to ensure that you have your block and your $0 tracker. You have to submit a minimum of one $0 tracker per block. Otherwise, it will get rejected by HCAI. It's just how they have things set up. So if you have an adjuster that doesn't really want to see what dates the client came in for the block, they're out there. You can roll the dice and just submit your block with one $0 visit, and HCAI will accept it. Doesn't mean the adjuster will accept it, but the actual system, HCAI will accept it. All right, so let's talk about the situation where you do have to submit to TELUS, and TELUS says, Carrie, I am not accepting your block fees. I need to see these in individual amounts, and you can't send me $775 because TELUS isn't going to pay it. And that is really tricky. So how that works is we've kind of found a workaround with that, which I find works really well. It's a little complicated, but it still works really well. Usually the initial visit, I believe, is not an issue at $215. It's when it comes to the block fees that is tricky. So instead, and I don't know if you recall, and I'm just going to switch back to my regular MIG. If you notice, on my regular MIG, I've got my full block fee of $775. I'm not going to do this when I have to bill TELUS because TELUS won't take that. TELUS will reject that. What you can do is there's two different things you can do. What most clinics do is they are going to put in the amount that they normally charge for a physiotherapy visit. So maybe your normal amount is $98 that you charge per visit. And then you're going to bill TELUS each time the client comes in, because you don't want to wait, because TELUS has a 30-day limit. So you can't wait until you're billing HCAI to bill TELUS. You have to bill TELUS more regularly. So what you can do is, and in this case, I'm pretending that this particular clinic has, their usual rate is $77.50. So each time the client comes in, I have to do a little bit of extra work. I have to enter in a block fee and a tracker. And what this is doing is the block fee, I'm helping to submit to TELUS because I need to break this down because I can't send $775. And the tracker is just setting me up for when I'm going to be billing HCAI. So the tracker I'm not going to send to TELUS. The tracker is really there so that I can send it to HCAI when it's ready to go. So you enter in your block fee. Instead of it being $775, it's going to be whatever your usual amount is. And then just to make your life easy, you're going to enter in your tracker as well. And then you are going to submit each block fee each time the client comes in. And so each time the client comes in, you'll be entering in two services, your block one and your tracker. So this is a situation where we have the client coming in and I'm billing TELUS as things are going on, and then TELUS is paying. Once TELUS pays, I'm going to transfer the balance to HCAI, and then I can submit everything to HCAI. Here's the beautiful thing. HCAI is okay if we split the block fee up into smaller fees. They're not going to give you a hard time, thank goodness. So we can split it up this way and not have any issue with HCAI at all. The tricky part is, let's say that your fees are $98. The client only came in 5 times for that block, and I have to, the $98 doesn't add up to $775. So we've got a cool way in the software to see really quickly how much the services add up to. And some of you may know this and some of you may not, but you can flag, again, we can use our neat little trick. I can flag where I want to start, hold down the shift button, flag where I want to end. And what this does is the software does a little tally for me. So I can see up right underneath the function bar how much these services all add up to. So I can see, okay, these services add up to $387.50. All right, well, that's a far cry from $775. So you need to sort of sometimes make up the difference. Now, in this case, I cheated a little bit, and I divided it up into 10 sessions. Or no, maybe I didn't. I left some out. Oh, that's perfect. I left some out for us. Okay, so here we can see that all of these services add up to $620. So that is less than $775, and I need to submit the amount to HCAI, the full $775. So what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to take my block fee and I'm going to enter it in. And remember, when you enter in a block fee, it does not send the date, it only sends the amount. So I'm going to say here on my make block 1, I'm going to make up the balance. So 620 minus 775, in my head, my math is probably off, but I'm going to say 155. And therefore, this will make up the difference of the amount that's missing. So when you send it to HCAI, you're sending the full amount. Now, that was a lot, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with all of this. So I want to take some time now just to ask if anybody has any questions about this at all. Does anybody have any questions about how to handle regular MIGs and how to handle MIGs with extended health? if you guys do think of anything along the way, let me know. I know that this is a tricky one for most people, so I want to make sure I'm not going too fast for everybody and that everybody is on track with me. The one interesting thing that does, oh yeah.
So sorry, Carrie, can you hear me? We did have a question coming in asking if you need to enter a zero tracker for the very last appointment as well for the patient.
Ah, great question. For the very last appointment?
I believe so, yes.
Or the last one that I entered in to make up the difference?
So who asked that question, it's just posed as, do you need to enter a zero tracker for the last appointment?
Okay. Yes, for the last appointment, definitely you should enter in the $0 tracker because that is letting the adjuster know when they came in. The one that I made the difference up on, I know you didn't ask about that, but the one that I made the difference up on, you don't need to enter in a $0 visit. Because when you're submitting this to HCAI, I'm going to be submitting all of these, like everything I have flagged here. And as long as there is at minimum one $0 visit, all of these MIGs will go through. So if we go ahead and take a look at this, as we did before in a preview, just so you can see what it looks like, we're going to click the envelope with a piece of paper or click F11 on your keyboard. Again, we're going to be invoicing them. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to do a preview. You'll see it's going to look a lot different because I didn't transfer them to HCAI yet. So let's transfer these guys. I'm going to pretend I just sent it to Extended Health. And here we go. Let's take a look at what it looks like going to HCAI. So if we look at how it's going to HCAI, you'll notice that it's a lot bigger than the other one. The other one had the basic block fees, so we didn't have as many services here. But here you're going to see an SZZPR with a matching block fee, and that's okay. And then you're going to be able to double check your amount. So again, always double check your amount to make sure you're sending the right fee code. I think there was a question that came in.
There might have been, yeah. And guys, just to do a little logistic check, if anybody does have their speakerphone still on, if you could go ahead and put yourself on mute just so that there's no background music or background talking in the background as well, that'd be awesome. Thank you. And Carrie, I don't know if there was another question. Did you get one?
Thank you, Heather. I did. I saw, does this eliminate the OCF 21? Did you see that question, Heather?
No, it might have gone just to you directly.
Okay. This is actually the OCF 21Cs. Mm-hmm. So that's usually what the MIGs are. So it eliminates you having to do them on the HCAI portal. It makes it easier for you. So it doesn't precisely eliminate them. It just is hopefully making it easier for you if you're doing MIGs on the actual portal. And I'm not sure if anybody knows this, but I love this little trick. I'm going to post an invoice, an HCAI invoice, because this is something that a lot of people don't know. I can go into activities by invoice, which is, and let me show you because sometimes it's hard to see my mouse. So I'm clicking this little icon here. Oops, not that one. This little icon here. So the book with the envelope in front of it. If I wanted to see what I'm actually sending, I can reproduce my HCAI invoice. So it's not in an electronic format, or that format that I'm viewing sort of the pre-scrub report. I can click the printer icon, and I have the option to choose an AI-SI invoice. Now, those of you, I remember these. I don't know how many other people will remember these, but those of you that remember before HCAI was around, if I preview this actually shows what it looks like. And here is your actual OCF 21. And I believe if we scroll down a little bit, so you can see, what you're sending in a format. If you're familiar with this format, you can see what you're sending. And you can see here precisely when we're talking about minor injury guidelines and minor injury treatment. Here's my minor injury guidelines, my MIG trackers. You can see there's no money on them whatsoever. All we're seeing is dates. But if we come down and look at our blocks, we see the money, and we see they all have the same date. So really important concept, because sometimes people will put the money on the tracker and then they'll say, Carrie, I sent it to HCAI. I can see in Practice Perfect. I was billing them, $1,000, and you can see in Practice Perfect they billed $1,000, but they put all the money on the tracker. Well, HCAI doesn't get any money when you put it on a tracker or a minor injury treatment. It has to be on the actual block. So hopefully that's helpful to some people. And I love using this option of the AISI invoice if I just kind of want to see what was sent in a visual way other than logging into HCAI. But of course you can log into HCAI and see this nice and quickly as well. So another fun little tip. Hopefully that helped. All right. So the one other thing that I do want to talk about is there is a situation that happens a lot. I believe I'm not sure who that is in the background there. We can hear some background noise. If someone doesn't mind making sure your phones are on mute, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. You have clients that come in that have extended health, and then they're also billing HCAI. The client, you're not actually billing extended health for them. The client is actually paying up front. So what some clinics do is that, okay, the client's paying up front, no problem. I'm going to enter in the service. They're coming in for, and this would be just probably an OCF 18. It could be not usually a MIG, but just an OCF 18. So I'll bill them for a regular MVA session. And the client, I'm going to enter this in under the client. The client's going to come and pay me. So I'm going to take payment for this. And then or they're gonna send to the extended health, then the extended health is gonna pay them, then they're gonna come and pay you, or they're gonna pay you up front, or what have you, however that works for that particular situation. Because of how HCAI is set up, you can't set up the system that way where you're billing a client first. If you bill the client first and then transfer to HCAI, the information doesn't get sent to HCAI properly. So what you have to do is you have to, even though the client is paying, you have to enter it in as a payer. Find out what their extended health is. If it's Sun Life or if it's Manulife, find out what that is and enter it in as that payer, and then you can transfer it to HCAI. You can't transfer a service from a client to HCAI for whatever reason. It just doesn't get translated well to HCAI. So if you run into that situation at all, that would help you with that. So always, if the client is paying, enter it in as if the insurance company is paying. And the other thing to keep in mind, you can only transfer once. So let's say that I entered this in as the client and then realized, oh, I can't do that because I know there's an issue with HCAI. So now I'm going to transfer this balance to extended health and then enter in the payment, and then from extended health transfer to HCAI. You can't do that either. HCAI, if you have more than one transfer happening on a data service, it will get rejected by HCAI. It can't do its calculations properly in the electronic file. So you can only have one transfer, and that's from the extended health to HCAI, and that's it. So another little fun tidbit for you. All right. So given that there aren't a lot of questions, it looks like I do have some time that I'm able to go over the OCF 18s and 23s, unless, again, I will open the floor up again one more time in case that has prompted any other questions. If anybody has any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I'll happily go on to our OCF 18s and 23s and talk about those.
Carrie, it's Heather. Yes, we do have a couple of requests in the background for the OCF 18s and 23s. So it looks like we have people that really are interested in seeing that portion.
Oh, wonderful. Good. This is working out perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, everybody, for your patience, for those that were waiting for that specifically. So let's let's get talking about it then. Not waste any more time. So in the software, there's going to be a little icon, and you usually access it from the client's details. It's this little guy here. And if I hover my mouse over top of it, it will say something. My mouse will work. It'll say client OCF 23/18 listing. This is how you access your OCF 18s and 23s. So you no longer have to do them on the HCAI portal either. So this is exciting. Now I've done up some new ones to show you, but if I was going to create one right from scratch, it's just like anything else in the software. I'm going to click the little green plus sign, and that's how I'm going to create it. So if I click the green plus sign, I get to choose the option of an OCF 23 and an OCF 18. And I've done some samples because I wanted to save time and I didn't want to take you through, waste a lot of time doing them. So we'll take a quick peek at sort of what they look like. So they are going to look different than the HCAI portal, but a lot of the information, it gets transferred over very nicely. So when I go to create it, this is what you're presented with. You have this little window that opens up with some tabs. So it definitely looks different than HCAI, but it does translate all the same. So you're going to data fill some basic fields. Not all fields are going to be data filled. So the description is just for your purposes, and you put in the primary payer. If you need section 5, then there's a field for that. Usually you're just going to be putting in the client signature date, the provider date, and that's pretty much it. This is an OCF 18, so I know there's MIGs on here, so we're just going to ignore that on the OCF 18 because that's not applicable. MIGs are associated with your OCF 23. In the there's an injury tab where the therapist can do their text. There's a gold tab, again, where the therapist can do their text. And then we've got the treatment tab where you're going to come in and you're going to enter in the services that you want approval for. So you will come on in here and you will choose the services just as you would on the HCAI portal. And it's a little tricky. It took me a little while to figure this out, so I'm happy I get to share this with you. The quantity is always going to remain as 1. This isn't going to change. It's the volume where you're going to come in and put in the amount. So if I came in here to put in another treatment, I'm going to choose something that might seem not applicable, but just so I can show you what it looks like, I'm going to choose, let's say, we're going to do heat. My quantity is going to stay at 1, but I'm going to say we're going to apply heat 15 times. Now, when I put in that 15 times, you'll see it automatically data the cost for me. So this volume column is where the magic happens. So we want to leave quantity as is. You want to pop in the duration weeks, and that's about it. Everything else, you just leave. And when you hit OK, it should go through. So, oh, sorry, you'll say OK to save it. My apologies. And now we want to submit it. So submitting it is you're going to flag the OCF 18 or 23. I'm going to click my printer icon on my function bar. So this little guy here. And then I'm going to have the option to send, to preview, and to cancel. And I'm a big previewer. I love to preview. So I would probably preview again to make sure that my fee codes are looking as HCAI fee codes. And we can see here we are getting a ton of errors. So you can see in this fee code session, none of these are fee codes that HCAI will accept. So this is where, you know what, I haven't finished my setup on my fee codes. So I need to go into settings, HCAI settings, and put in the appropriate HCAI fee code that they'll accept. And
Carrie,
yeah.
Can you also talk about, when you're done this, about the signature? You know, when you have the paper OCF 18s and 23s, you need the patient to sign and you need to keep the signature on file. Can you tell everybody how that works when you're submitting electronically like this?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so, and again, there's some things that are missing. So this means that I need to go back in, I need to clean some things up, and then once it's cleaned up, I can click send. Now, as Heather mentioned, you want to keep the signature on file. They've created a lovely way of doing this for you. So you can come here and print this form by checking off this little box. So it'll print out for you. You then have the client sign it, and then you can scan that into Practice Perfect. Now, if people are not familiar with how to scan into Practice Perfect, really briefly, I shall show you. When you are in this HCAI area, it's kind of tricky to get out. There's no, shortcuts to use. You're going to use either your, on the far right here, your back button or your X will get you out of here. So if I have a document, if I printed off this OCF, I had the client sign and I want to save it, then I am going to scan it into the hard drive of my computer that has Practice Perfect on it, because it's probably more than one page. So you're going to use your scanner, scan it in, save it onto the hard drive of your computer. Then you're going to come into Activities by Documents, the two little pieces of paper, and I'm going to click. Well, I can do one of two things. It depends what you feel up to. You can click this little shortcut icon here, which is this little piece of paper, or we can click the green plus sign and choose Import Document. And that takes us to this place. And you'll notice that the little icon that I circled, the little piece of paper, takes me to that same place without me having to go into the plus sign. And then you'll come in and you'll find that file and pop it in. So to add in a file into Activities by Service, we do have videos on this. So if you do need to brush up on this, you usually click this little icon here, find where you saved that OCF document, add it in, and then it will be saved in the client's Activities by Document area. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to pop those in.
Carrie, I do have a couple questions coming up. One of them is about using goods and services, like a heat pad. That's a question from one of the attendees today, how that shows up on your invoice and how you quickly set that up as well.
Perfect, yes. The goods and services comes into play when we do the OCF 23. So let's dive into the OCF 23 and I will show you what that looks like. Not much different than the OCF 18. Really good question. So again, I'm in the client's details and I've got that little icon again, that little piece of paper, which is just beside TELUS. So I'm going to click on this and click the green plus sign to create an OCF 23. I already have one pre-done, so I can highlight it and click the pencil icon, and this opens up the existing OCF 23 that I have. And so you'll notice screen's a little bit different than the OCF 18, but not much, still has the same things. You've got your injury tab, you've got your treatment, and here you have your treatment area. So this is where you're going to put in what you're going to be billing HCAI. Now, this is where the goods and services is a little strange. So first off, we're going to check off MIG. PAF is done. Nobody's using that anymore. The other field you're going to data fill is the amount. What's the total of the MIG that you're going to be submitting? So your initial, your block 1, block 2, block 3, and anything else. And then this is where your goods and services comes in, right here. All you do, you don't choose a code, you don't choose a rate, you don't choose a description. All you do is put in 400 for the goods and services, and that takes care of it. It is very strange, I understand, but this is the way that you submit it. And again, if you come across this and you're submitting one and you're stuck, reach out to support. Support can help you with this. Now, I have one little tidbit that not a lot of people know that I want to point out, and I just typed in a brief little note about it, and I'm going to talk about it as well. You can't use special characters when you're typing in an OCF 18 or 23. It will cause you to receive this error that says HCAI command has stopped working. And you think, what? My toolkit's not working anymore? What's going on? It causes it to have a little bit of a seizure when there's special characters inserted into the text. And, you know, some of these characters are basic characters that, honestly, therapists do use quite a bit. And so the characters are here. It's the less than sign, the greater than sign, double quotes, single quotes, and ampersand. These characters will cause a little hiccup and things not to go through to HCAI. So hopefully you can pass that along to your therapist to let them know, you know, please don't use these when you're typing in your text anywhere in the OCF 18 or 23. Also, if these characters are in the client's name or the client's address in the details in Practice Perfect, it will also cause that error to show up and you can't submit it to HCAI. It's just one of the limitations that HCAI has. So just wanted to add that little tidbit in there because that's usually a tough error to figure out. And again, remind you again, you come across an error, please don't spend a lot of time on it. Just send the error to support, and support will be very familiar with it and get you up and running in no time.
Carrie, I do have one last question coming in. It's not really a practice perfect thing. It's more of an HCAI thing, but you might know this just from your experience in the support team. So when you submit the $400 for the goods and services, do you have to support what adds up to 400, or is 400 just a flat fee that they'll pay regardless of what your goods and services actually are?
That's a good question. So on the treatment plan, it doesn't look like you have to support anything on it, but when you're actually submitting it through the incident, and when you're setting it up using your, let me go into activities by service here. So when you'd be submitting your MIG through activities by service, you would submit the MIG SG. So I'd come in here, and when I'm ready to submit for my goods and services, I'm going to choose my MIG SG. And maybe it's going to be for the full 400. Maybe it's only going to be for $78 because this was a massage. It'll really depend on what the clinics are doing. I haven't noticed that adjusters require specific things because it just comes through as the code MIG SG.
Yeah, I would imagine you might, like if the claims adjuster or the insurance adjuster asks you for details, you may have to support how much you billed. When I look at the MIG definition, it's up to $400 is the wording that it shows. So just an FYI for who asked that question. I'm not actually 100% sure if everybody can just enter the $400 amount. I believe you may be asked at some point to support it. You may not, but I believe it's between you and the adjuster.
For sure. And what you can do is another little tidbit for you guys, which you may not know, is you can put notes on the invoice when you're sending it. And there's this little icon here, this little sticky note. So if I put a sticky note on a date of service, so I'll come in here and I'll choose my sticky note and I will say, this is for massage, and just put this note in here and say, okay. You'll see a little note icon on the date of service. Whatever's in that sticky note will show up in the notes section for the adjuster on the invoice. So if you wanted to just make note of what you're using the goods and services for when you're submitting the OCF 21C, you can. And of course, when you're doing your OCF 23 and you're submitting for the goods and services, so if I come on out of here, there is an area where you are able to put in, so we come on back in here and we go to treatment. There is an area down here where you can put in an explanation for your goods and services when you're submitting the treatment plan. Yeah, good questions.
Yeah, lots of great questions coming up here.
Absolutely.
Carrie, one more question that did come up here. I can't find it, but I'm going to do it by memory. I just want to make sure I did give the right answer on that one. There was a couple of people actually who asked that before you submit something to HCAI electronically, can you preview it as if it was the OCF 21 form itself, or is it always going to show you that submission form? My understanding was there wasn't a way to do that. The only way to look at it at the form would be to produce the invoice, go back, print it, and then ask for it to print or preview on the AISI format. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you're right. If you, you're absolutely right, Heather. You could post an invoice to the services and then preview it as the AISI. And then if you were satisfied with that, then you could go ahead and just come into your activities by invoice, because there's only going to be one invoice here, and then I could just delete it and then go ahead and go back and submit it actually to HCAI.
Okay,
so
perfect.
It would be one or two extra steps, but it might be worth it if you want to preview it as an AISI.
Awesome, perfect. And can you just do that one more time on screen for everybody, where you can find maybe an invoice that you've done a post only or even submit it to HCAI and show them how you would view it on the actual OCF 21 Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a hidden little trick that not a lot of people know about. It's one of my favorites. So I can either do it from activities by service,
If I do it from activities by service, then I have to expand a data service and flag the invoice. I usually like to do it from activities by invoice, which is the envelope with the piece of paper coming out of it, just because I find that it's just easier to navigate. But again, it's totally up to you. I'm just going to flag the invoice. I'm going to click the printer icon, which is, and I'll circle that because I believe my mouse is hard to see. So there we go. Circle the printer icon. And I don't want to reproduce this as the original because the original is an HCAI invoice. So I'm going to click the drop-down menu. And that's the very first option, AISI invoice. And then I'm going to do a preview. And then this shows up as a beautiful OCF 21 for me to see all the wonderful details in there. And especially the fun ones when it comes, whoops, that's one a little fast, where I can see what I'm actually sending them for charges.
The good old days when we used to have to fill this out.
I know. But it's still a good tool to have. I'm glad they kept it around because it does really help you sort of see things and understand, like I was explaining before, the minor injury treatments don't send the money and the minor injury guidelines do.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I just want to point out as well, and I'll get Carrie to comment on that too, is that this integration that we have with HCAI is really a one-way, mostly communication. It's usually sending information directly from Practice Perfect over to HCAI. Once it gets to HCAI, if you're trying to find the status of an OCF 18 or 23, has it been approved? Is there any comments or something from the adjuster? I believe you have to go to HCAI just like normal and log in to see those details. Is that correct, Carrie?
You are dead on, Heather. Absolutely. It is a one-way communication.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thanks.
Okay, excellent. All right. So, Carrie, have you finished your presentation today?
I definitely have. I unless there's any other questions, and it can be in regards to anything in regards to HCAI. It doesn't just have to be MIG related. Heather and I are more than happy to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A couple of questions that have come up, and just I'm only going to address this because we do have a little bit of time here at the end. But the question seems to be concerning when you have that complicated situation, of course, where you have a MIG, motor vehicle minor injuries guideline, motor vehicle patient, and they have extended health care that needs to have the services broken down. And the questions are really surrounding about the funding amount. So let's say block 1 is, you know, 775, block 2 is whatever, block 3 is whatever. And in theory, as they go through the blocks, you probably have less and less numbered visits with that client, right? Let's say block 3, actually there's a specific question on block 3, or that amount is about 225. And how do you handle that? How do you make sure that you don't actually overbill extended healthcare? If you're going to see that patient, let's say 10 times in that block 3, and that's only 225, that's the value of block 3. What do most clinics do, or what is the best practice for trying to get those services broken down to tell us if your normal charge is, let's say, $90 a visit?
That's a good question, and it is really tricky, and it's something that you do sort of have to monitor. I don't have an easy answer for it. You could use your billing rules if you wanted to help sort of track those things, but it's more so a manual process and just watching and using that trick that I showed everybody where, okay, you know, we're in block 1, how many services have I billed, where are we at here, and seeing that number and seeing where they're at, and watching it and making sure that you're billing the right amount. That's why, again, I find it so important to make sure that you're previewing and make sure that you are watching things. Some clinics I've seen do in the blue area, or this is the gray area. And if some of you are wondering, Carrie's Practice Perfect looks a little different, I'm on version 3. So we've released a new version 3. And so that's why it doesn't have the usual colors. So it's a little bit fancier, but still does all the wonderful same things. You can right click in the blue area and make notes. And I've seen some clinics say, you know, block 3, you know, there's so much left. just to sort of keep track of these types of things.
And Carrie, while we're here, can you show everybody where the videos are specifically? Because we actually do already have some videos on OCF 1823 set up for HCAI. Can you just make sure that everybody knows where the Learning Center is and where to find those?
Yes, thank you for reminding me, Heather. I always forget that one. Yes, we do have those videos, and I talked about the additional videos that we have for HCAI. So they are under the Health menu in Practice Perfect. And then you can go to About. And under About, we have a wonderful link that says University. And this will take you, that's one of the worst circles I've ever seen, but this will take you to our videos. So I'm clicking on this link, and let's see, it's slowly opening up. I apologize. Here we go. So it will open up a page for you that has all of the videos. And there's a section called HCAI. If I just scroll down a little bit here, we have a tele section, as you can. Over on the left, there's a tele section, a client portal, telehealth, starting Practice Perfect, and actually, sorry, it's not called HCAI, it is called Ontario. So we have a section over on the left here that is called Ontario, and a lot of videos. We don't have a MIG video as of yet, so that's one of the reasons why we did this, but the MIG videos will be coming. But we are covering off 18s, 23s, and OCF 21B.
Perfect. And Carrie, maybe just point out on the right-hand side too, the continuing education section. That's where all our webinars actually are being recorded and they're uploaded there. So those are actual training sessions that you can take advantage of anytime you like. And every time we have a webinar Wednesday, we record it, and then that is also where you'll find this recording. It takes about 1 week or so to get into that area, but you should definitely see it by this time next week. Excellent. Is there any other questions, guys? I know we're just right about time for 2 o'clock, and some of you have to go, and that's completely fine. And if you, Carrie, can you show everybody the help and about section too? Carrie's just going to point out on the screen, if you do need to shout out to support any questions, concerns, anything you thought about after this session, not understanding something that we talked about for sure, Carrie's just pointing out on the help and about section, just go ahead and use that email address there. Pose your question, just make sure you tell support where you're calling, or the name of your clinic, where you're calling from, and your question, of course, and they will get back to you. And if you want to reach Carrie or myself, my name is Heather. You can use that email address. Just replace the very first part of that, support, with either of our names, Heather or Carrie, and it's Carrie if you want to reach Carrie directly. So,
thank you, Heather.
Yes, excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for attending. This is our last webinar for the series, the spring series. We're going to be taking a break in the summertime, but have a look out on social media. Look out for your newsletters. We're probably going to make a couple of announcements. We're going to be starting them back up again probably in the fall. So if anybody does have any suggestions, or you're hoping we would do a webinar on a certain topic, just let us know. We'll make it happen. So thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for attending.
Yes, thank you, everybody. It was lovely having you all here and taking time out of your busy day. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.